Now, despite my claim of this being Nintendo's Dark Age, I am not talking about the games that were released in this period, which are ironically considered some of the best of all time. No, instead what I plan to discuss is the decline in sales that the company had and how they lost their dominance in the video game industry to their new rivals, and how they eventually managed to make a comeback. And with that out of the way, let's jump into this, and I hope you enjoy the video.
Attention shoppers, the new Atari cartridge game is in.
Excuse me.
Uh-oh, George again.
Ooh, Atari's AFC battle.
It comes with 27 games, but that's just for starters. You can get 9 cartridges, 187 games.
Blackjack. Oh!
I'd like an Atari.
Sorry, only our demonstrators left.
Mine!
No, George. Mine.
The new video computer system by Atari. More games, more fun.
On September 11th, 1977, the modern video game market was born with the release of the first major successful console, the Atari Video Computer System, or 2600. This system was the way people could play their favorite arcade hits at home, as well as all new games made for the system itself. And I don't want to understate how big Atari had gotten, with them becoming one of the biggest companies in the world, with their highest estimated worth at one point being over $2 billion. This was thanks to them pumping out hit after hit, such as Space Invaders, Pong, Asteroids, Adventure, Pitfall, Breakout, and not to mention the deals that led to them creating games based off of the biggest movie of all time, Star Wars. It truly seemed like no one could dethrone these newly declared kings of video gaming. Not even the company's many competitors in Mattel Electronics with their Intellivision, Magnavox with their Odyssey 2, Coleco with their ColecoVision, or Fairchild with their Channel F. No, they would instead have to feed off the scraps and run off from Big Dog Atari. And that's how it was. It just seemed like the good times would never stop rolling and Atari would continue to conquer this newly emerging video game craze.
With the Atari 2600 video game system, games don't get older, they get better. Take Space Wars from 1979 versus the Solaris of today.
The home video fad of the early 80s had a spectacular rise, but the bottom fell out of the first home video boom virtually overnight. In 1983, earnings for the industry peaked at $3 billion. Only 2 years later, sales plummeted to a paltry $100 million.
The 1983 video game crash was when this entertainment medium was at its lowest. Although there were many great games still being released, such as from the new company Activision, which was created and led by ex-Atari workers, there were definitely more bad games entering the market than good. This was mainly caused because of no quality control. Developers could half-ass a game, sell it for full price, and consumers ate it up regardless of how bad or unfinished it was, simply because they didn't know any better. This created a bubble that kept getting bigger until it would finally end up bursting in the faces of all major video game companies, but especially Atari. And the two games that busted the bubble were the infamous E.T. and Pac-Man port for the 2600. Both of these games were considered to be too big to fail when they were released, but now they are considered two of the worst games of all time. They were broken, rushed, unplayable, etc., and the public had enough. They returned the games en masse, leading to Atari to lose millions. It had seemed that this was the end of video games in general, that this was deemed nothing more than a fad that had died out as quickly as it became popular. And so it was. Atari was down and out, and they would never be able to recover from this massive hit. So it was up to another company to come along and revive the video game market from its deathbed. Enter Nintendo, a company that was founded on September 23, 1889 that originally sold playing cards. And after many forays into different lines of business throughout their years, including a taxi company, a chain of love hotels, and selling instant rice, Nintendo had decided to throw their hat into the newly emerging video game market. They started with creating arcade games, with their first game, Laser Clay Shooting System, being released in 1973. Then they jumped into the newly formed home console market with the release of the Color TV Game 6 in 1977, which was basically just a Pong console, which were a dime a dozen at that point. But despite this, the entire Color TV game series would go on to sell a total of 3 million units, giving the company moderate success. While back on the arcade side of things, Nintendo was also having average success with 21 games released up to 1981, which was about 3 games a year. So at this point in time, Nintendo had dipped their toe into the video games industry and had a strong idea of how they work and what the public wanted, but if they didn't release something that would sell well, they could have easily ditched this market and ventured into another form of business just like they had done so in the past. But this wouldn't end up happening because on July 9th, 1981, that breakthrough was made with the release of Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong would end up being their ace in the hole, with it becoming not only their biggest hit game in Japan, but also it finally being the game that won over American players. But unfortunately, their success would be short-lived due to the video game crash. Now, with the video game industry having gone under, you'd think that Nintendo would have jumped ship and moved on to yet another business venture. But no. Instead, they saw what potential video games had, not only financial-wise, but also for entertainment as a whole. So they dug in their heels and started working on their first real home console,